Hello everyone, it's Bob with another FINOP Controller webcast. This week we're going to discuss the reserve calculations line 4 and 5, fails to receive, and inventory sold to customers. Short recap of what's included in the credit categories for the reserve calculation. And you can see there, of course, 4 and 5 are our fails to receive and inventory sales. So what are we going to discuss today? First of all, we're going to define what is a fail to receive. We're going to talk about what's a short inventory short sale to a customer. Why are the customer's funds removed from their account before the firm has the shares they've purchased? What's the difference between a fail to receive and a CNS fails to receive? And what is a delivery versus payment account? Before we get started, a few disclaimers and notes. The biggest ones are being this presentation is for educational purposes only. It's not legal advice. If you're actually doing a calculation, then you should refer to the rules, and you can find those at the finro.org website. The best way, I think, to use this presentation is to take a look at what your firm's calculation has, and then compare the items that we're going to discuss today. So let's talk about a fails to receive. What is it? And that's when a contra broker dealer, and a contra broker is the other broker that you purchase the customer's security from, and they don't deliver the purchased shares on settlement date. Now, as you're probably well aware at this point, most security purchases settle on T+2, or 2 days after the trade date, T standing for trade date. On that particular date, the firm's going to debit the customer's account for the shares, and they should pay the broker-dealer if the shares have been delivered. If the shares aren't delivered, then they're going to have a payable, and that payable is called a fail to receive. So instead of having the customer's cash in there, you're going to put the fails to receive dollar amount in there. And then when the contra broker-dealer is ready to make the delivery of the shares, they're going to send in the money, and then you're going to release the shares to the other broker-dealer. So what's a fails to receive CNS? And CNS stands for continuous net settlement. There is a clearing corporation in the United States called the National Securities Clearing Corp, and they're going to handle most of the equities, the listed bonds, the UITs that settle within the United States. Now, what happens with CNS is that NSCC will step into the middle of a transaction, and both BDs will settle with NSCC and not with each other. In that particular instance, NSCC will then net down all of the contracts for a particular security from a particular broker-dealer. So, for example, if your firm has traded 10 or 15 times buys and sells of the same security, and NSCC steps into the middle of all those transactions, they're going to net down all those buys and sells. So your firm has only either one delivery to make or one payment to make. And that's going to go directly to NSCC and not to the 10 different other broker dealers you dealt with. Now, another thing for CNS is that on a daily basis, NSCC will mark each net position to market and require additional deposits if that's necessary. So what are you going to include on the reserve calculation line 4 fails to receive? Well, it's the contract values for all of the fails to receive, the ones that aren't going to clear through NSCC. And if you have any deficits, if those contracts have been outstanding 30 days or longer, and if you have any contract deficits or fails to receive, that's when your market value is greater than your contract value. You're going to have to add those into the reserve calculation also. You're also going to add in all of the NSCC fails to receive for CNS. And again, as we said before, you don't have to worry about mark-to-markets because that's done on a daily basis for them. So that's going to be the total dollar amount of what you add in, and you're going to be able to subtract off items that aren't related to customer transactions. So let's take a look at that on the next slide. So that's going to include any fail to deliver versus fail to receive that allocate. And you can see here, if you're doing the alternative method for net capital, you're also going to have to reduce your net capital calculation by 1%. Securities borrowed versus fail to receive. Same deal, alternative to net capital. You're going to reduce that net capital calculation by 1%. And also, if you've got any firm longs versus fail to receive, any non-customer longs versus fail to receive, and any proprietary accounts or suspense accounts versus fail to receive. Now, fail to receive means all varieties such as fail to receive CNS, fail to receive muni bonds, fail to receive government securities, etc. And that also works the same for any definitions for fail to deliver. So that's what you're going to subtract from line 4, fails to receive. So let's talk about line 5, short inventory principal sales to customers. In this particular instance, your firm is acting as a dealer because it holds shares that it's going to sell to the customers. And so in this particular instance, they're going to buy, the customer is going to buy a security that the firm is a dealer in. And if the firm doesn't have sufficient amount of shares to make for the customer's purchase, then what's going to happen is that the rules will allow the broker-dealer to have this short position on its books. It's not required to go out and fill the entire order for the customer. Now, a similar situation can occur when the firm offers a dividend reinvestment program. In that particular instance, whenever a customer receives dividends from a security, the firm will then go out and purchase additional shares of that security. If there is insufficient amounts, in other words, to purchase a whole security or even a round lot of securities, then the firm is allowed to keep fractional shares on its books, or at the same time less than a round lot of securities, round lot being 100 shares. Now, in both instances, the firm will debit the customer's account and not have sufficient shares in custody, and the firm is required to put sufficient funds into the reserve calculation for these transactions. Let's take a look at line 5, principal sales to customers, and see what's included in these allocations. All right, now this is kind of an interesting one. So far, for all the lines we've discussed, we've talked about putting in from the balance sheet the dollar amount for these particular contracts, and then we subtract off items that are not related to customer transactions. Here, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to use the allocations and build up to what should be included in the reserve calculation. So for line 5, you're going to include the following, and that's customer long versus firm short, customer long versus non-customer short, DVP versus firm short, or DVP versus non-customer short. And in addition, consider putting the following in to be conservative, and that's unallocated firm short or unallocated non-customer short. So what's the delivery versus payment, or DVP account? And that's really a payment process designed to reduce credit risk by requiring securities to be delivered only if payment can be made at the exact same time. So a DVP is a sale of securities. The opposite is an RVP, or receive versus payment. That's a buy. These two transactions can also be known as COD, or cash on delivery. They're usually going to be used by your larger institutional customers. And what's going to happen here is that instead of receiving the funds at your firm's broker-dealer, you're probably going to be using a custodian or a bank, and the cash and securities are going to be sent to the bank or the custodian directly. And the way this works is that there is going to be a SWIFT banking system message sent to the settlement agent, such as the bank or the depository trust company. And then upon receipt of the securities, the settlement agent will transfer the funds, and usually this transaction will occur as simultaneously as possible. Okay, so that's it for our discussion of lines 4 and 5 for the reserve calculation. If you've got any questions, send me an email at bob@rmmilburnconsulting.com. Thank you.